Hello, dear friends. Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Just a little above 0 degrees out here today. It's a little later in the day today, and we are covering chapter 2. So this will be video part 2 in the review of A Shattered Visage, The Real Face of Atheism by Ravi Zacharias. He was notorious after he passed away of some indiscretions, but I'm not going to be talking about that because that has nothing to do with my interest in this topic, and really has nothing to do with his research on the topic either. So why bring it up, right? But if people want to bring it up, yeah, I guess the guy did some crappy stuff. So in the first chapter, we talked about the main characters as the concept of atheism took hold, and the main character, I guess you could say, I mean, obviously it's been around forever, but would be Charles Darwin and the evolution of the species that he wrote. He took a boat tour and he went around. He visited these Galapagos Island, and he went all over the place around, South America, Africa, the ocean, and he has a very famous journey that he took, and he documented all his observations of birds and tortoises and animals and all that kind of stuff. And so he came up with the idea that perhaps animals evolved. But when he wrote Evolution of the Species, as is mentioned in here, he openly admitted to being a theist, that he did believe in God, that there were a number of things that his theory of evolution couldn't account for. And so that's important to be aware of, that Charles Darwin was not a militant atheist by any stretch of the imagination at all, or not agnostic for that matter. He openly admitted, and that is mentioned here as well by Zacharias. Where did he mention that? Here on page 33, he says, Darwin clearly stated in his autobiography that he was a theist when he wrote The Origin of the Species. He just calls it The Origin for short. But let's backtrack a little bit into chapter 1, because I just want to bring a couple of points about the characters in the big push of atheism that happened in the, I guess you could say, 1800s and onwards. So it says, Karl Marx wanted to dedicate Das Kapital to Charles Darwin. He was so impressed. He requested Darwin to accept the dedication in the English translation, but Darwin declined the offer. That notwithstanding, the correspondence between Marx and Engels showed how exultant Marx was of the Darwinian thesis. For Marx himself, religion was the opening of the people. Darwin didn't like religion at all. Marx didn't like religion at all, and he was so taken with Charles Darwin's ideas that he wanted to dedicate his own book, a famous Marxist book called Das Kapital, to Darwin. And then also here, in his book Modern Times, the historian Paul Johnson referred to Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini as the three devils of the 20th century. Interestingly, Nietzschean dogma influenced each of them. So profound and operative was Nietzsche's philosophy upon Hitler that it provided the conceptual framework for his demagogical onslaught to obliterate the weak and inferior of his world. That being done, he would establish the supremacy of the Superman in an unobstructive and dominant role. Hitler also personally presented a copy of Nietzsche's works to Benito Mussolini. And of course, as I mentioned in the previous video, Nietzsche was extremely influenced by Darwin's ideas as well. He used his ideas to attack religion at any chance he had. And he was probably the most prolific European character from the 1900s that attacked theism and Christianity in particular. Nietzsche in particular went out of his way. It says Nietzsche despised religion in general and Christianity in particular with unbridled fury. Some of the denunciations were as vilifying as could be imagined. well, you can imagine, because he wrote a book called The Antichrist, or just Antichrist was the name of his book, in which he called Christianity the most intense curse. He called it. I'm not even going to repeat his quote because it's so perverted. But anyway, Nietzsche and these other characters were influenced by Darwin's ideas. It took them and ran with them. And then one other character which is important as we move into chapter 2, who was influenced by Darwin, was Thomas Henry Huxley. You've probably heard of the name Huxley. Thomas Henry Huxley was the grandfather of Aldous Huxley, and Thomas Henry Huxley coined the phrase agnosticism. So he didn't, Thomas Huxley took Darwin's ideas and used them to attack religion as well. He was called Darwin's pit bull, they used to call him, because he took Darwin's ideas and used them to attack religion. And his grandson, Aldous Huxley, is the famous writer of the book Brave New World. Well, Aldous Huxley was a well-known acid head and was also agnostic as well. So there you go. Just to tell you a little bit about some of the characters that were influenced by Darwin and who were influential in the entire push of atheism and agnosticism in the 19th and 20th century, early 20th century. So the thing that Zacharias addresses in chapter 2 that I want to leave with you before I finish this video, and then we'll move on to chapter 3 in the next video. But in chapter 2, I want to read you this quote that Zacharias brings up, and I hope it's not the only time that he's going to try and define atheism. But if it is, it's unfortunately rather disappointing, because based on the interactions that I've had with hundreds of atheists through my channel personally, as well as a lot of writing from atheists that I've read, this definition is lacking, and I'll explain to you why in a brief second. So from page 30, this is Ravi Zacharias speaking. He says, by definition, atheism is the doctrine of belief that there is no God. It is an affirmation of God's non-existence. This ought not to be confused with agnosticism, which claims not to know. Postulating the non-existence of God, atheism immediately commits the blunder of an absolute negation, which is self-contradictory. For to sustain the belief that there is no God, it has to demonstrate infinite knowledge, which is tantamount to saying, I have infinite knowledge that there is no being in existence with infinite knowledge. Let's not, however, get bogged down in the morass of such pedantic verbal dead ends. Other counter-arguments are more important. And he moves on he talks about the first great hurdle to cross is the question of origin. He goes on, the initial cause, and how did something come from nothing, and that breaks the laws of physics of conservation of energy and entropy. And that's very interesting in its own right. But this particular portion, this particular paragraph where he tries to define atheism as in that way, has been completely evaded by the bulk of atheists that have had the unfortunate or fortunate opportunity to be in contact with. And the reason is because this is an active definition of atheism, where they say the atheist says, for example, David Suzuki, a Canadian environmentalist, was an active atheist. He said, he quotes himself and willingly defines his belief as saying, he says, I believe there is no God. That's what David Suzuki said. So David Suzuki was an active atheist. But as I said, most atheists do not use that definition. More and more atheists say, I have no awareness of God. So you can't use the word belief in defining what I am. That's what an atheist will tell you. If you say, well, you believe there's no God, atheists will say, oh, no, you're off on the wrong foot already. I don't believe there's no God. I have no awareness of God. I don't even, it doesn't even come into my mind. That kind of self-delusion and that kind of negation of any awareness of God is it's pretty pathetic, to be honest, because in the very next breath, they're willing to say, oh, God is horrible, and God is this, and why does God allow cancer in children? And they'll go on and on and on. But to say, but I don't have any awareness of God, right? So this is unfortunate that he doesn't address the passive definition of God, but he does use this little bit of verbal wordplay to claim that an active definition of atheism is self-contradictory, which is, it's kind of interesting the way and that could apply to a number of atheists, I suppose. Again, he says, by definition, atheism is the doctrine of belief that there is no God. And I do know for a fact that there are many atheists that don't use that definition to describe themselves. So that's just something that we'll have to keep in the back of our mind as we go through this book. And whether that will ever get addressed or not, I don't know, but it's certainly interesting. And he does talk about these initial arguments about the first cause are quite interesting, but I'm not really going to bother going through them here. I just wanted, the purpose of this series of videos is just to give a brief overview, and if there's anything that really jumps out at me that I think may be of interest or helpful to you, the viewer, I will definitely share them with you, and we'll go from there. So we're going to move on to chapter 3, and hopefully I'll have another video for you early next week sometime. So thank you so much for watching. Just making our way through this book by Ravi Zacharias, and we shall talk to you again soon. Hope you're able to have a great weekend, spend time with people you love, and thanks again for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Take care now. Bye.